So, Michael and Adele, welcome to my podcast.
You're listening to Freelancers.
My name's Adele.
And I'm Mike.
We are two creatives documenting the process from being an employee
to becoming independent in real time. Welcome to another interview episode. This is Freelancers number 14. We're joined by my great friend Eric Forbis living in LA. He's a very successful entrepreneur and he's the most independent person that I know who built his life around things he loves doing. We will be discussing mindfulness, meditation, Eric's incredible path of owning business after business, and about managing people. Just a quick warning, this time I messed up my audio setup, and so in this episode I'm recording myself on my headphones. Anyway, let's dive right into the conversation. A big part of your life is being really mindful about what you do, how you spend your time, and how do you treat others and yourself. So what do you consider mindfulness in general?
I think maybe I would just preface it by saying what mindfulness is to me, kind of what I understand mindfulness to be, because we hear a lot these days about mindfulness. I think that a lot of people don't really understand what it actually means. So I would say, at least for me, it's moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness. So it's cultivating your ability to be more in the present moment and to see what's really going on around you and within you. So to more clearly be able to see your thoughts and see the role they're playing in your life, and more clearly see your emotions and the role they're playing, and more clearly see what's going on around you in terms of people and your interactions with them. And in having that awareness, doing it in a way that doesn't judge what's happening, doesn't judge the experience. So it's not, and obviously we all do it, and you can be into mindfulness and still do it. It's never going to end, but it's just, you practice and you get better and better and better at it over time.
So it's pretty much taking back the control over your mind and decluttering it.
Yeah, it's being able to make more decisions about what you actually do want to spend your time thinking about, and whether a thought serves you and whether it's true. Those thoughts are just happening, right? The feelings are just happening. So that's kind of like one part of us. And then there's another part of us that's like the observer that can actually observe them happening, right? So I could be having a feeling right now, like maybe I'm feeling I just got back from a walk and I'm feeling like a little hot. So I have the sensation of being kind of warm a little bit right now, but also I can have the awareness that I'm feeling that. And so it's the same thing like with thoughts. So you have these thoughts that are going on all the time, and a lot of times we're not even observing that they're happening. They're just happening automatically. We're brushing our teeth, we're having thoughts. We got our mind going full speed, basically almost all day, right? And then there's a part of us that you can actually see those thoughts happening. And then once you see that they're actually happening, like really in real time, see, oh, this is what's happening in my head right now. Then you can start to make decisions about, oh, is that the way I want to keep thinking? Do I want to change what I'm thinking? You know what I'm saying? So it's the observer that when you settle and you just pay attention, you can see all this happening. But normally we're on autopilot, it's just happening, and we're just going with it, right? I mean, that's what happens with me.
Is meditation a big part of it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think in order for mindfulness to be able to have a real impact on your life, I think you really have to have some type of meditation practice, because that's where you are able to just settle down and see those thoughts coming. And so basically, meditation would be typically, right, it would be, let's say you're sitting, you don't have to be sitting, you could be standing, you could be laying down, but let's just say you're sitting, and then you're finding an object to put your attention on, so you can keep your attention in one place. And typically that would be the breath. It doesn't have to be the breath. It could be sounds around you. It could be bodily sensations that you're feeling. You could be kind of scanning your body and feeling the sensations. But let's just keep it to the breath. So then you pick an anchor. And so if the breath is your anchor, then you just want to pay attention to your breath. So you pay attention to the breathing coming in, breathing going out. And as you're doing that, you're going to have all these thoughts. They're going to come into your head, right? So then you just gently let them go. Just let the thoughts go. And as soon as they come back, which could be half a second later, 1 second later, 2 seconds later, then you just let it go again. As soon as you realize that you have thoughts coming, then you just let them go. And so what that does over time, so, if you do it, 20 minutes a day, let's say, and then you do it, every day, or at least 5 or 6 days a week, and then you do it week after week and month after month, and then eventually year after year, you're training your mind to stay more in the present and to be more aware that these thoughts really have so much control over our life. Dwelling on what's happened before, how things used to be, or how I wish things would be. Instead of just being right here in the present, kind of more relaxed and confident about being right here. It's kind of like mind training in the sense that the more you meditate, the more you train your mind to be right here. And also, this is something I just really want to say, is that I've been meditating.
That was my question. How long have you been meditating for?
Oh, wow. Okay. I started about 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it's only been about probably in the past 10 years or so kind of doing it as part of community. So like I've been part of different meditation communities. We go to talks, sometimes, and hear talks about meditation and mindfulness, and then we meditate together. And I've come across so many people through those experiences and just out in the real world, let's say, the rest of the world. People who say that, I tried meditating and I just can't do it. It's too hard, or I have a really active mind. That's one that comes up a lot. My mind's too active. And I want to tell them, like, everyone's mind is just that active. Like all of our minds, we're constantly going. The thing about meditation, I think so many people misunderstand or just don't learn enough about it, don't have, maybe the right teacher or a good teacher or something. You're going to be thinking during your meditation. It's not to stop your thoughts. It's impossible. But it's just to let them go. Once you realize you're having a thought, just let it go and come back to that focus of your attention, that anchor. And again, if it's your breath. So if you go a second and the meditation and you realize you're having thoughts, that's totally fine. Just as soon as you realize you're having a thought, let it go and come back to your breath. And it's through the repetition. It's like anything, like if you're working out, if you're learning a new language, whatever it is, it's all the repetition. So it's by doing that over and over and over again. You're going to be training your mind to stay more in the present, to be more aware of those thoughts when they happen out in the real world. So not when you're in the rest of your life, not just when you're meditating. And also it helps you with being more relaxed and more centered. It has these incredible effects on the brain. I can't speak highly enough about it. That's one of the reasons why, I'm so involved with some of the projects I'm involved with.
I just started trying out meditation like 6 days ago. So I'm very, very new to this.
In preparation for this interview, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to have this guy on who likes to meditate, and I better at least try it.
I've been trying just 3 minutes before I go to sleep. I was going to say every night, but I'm working nights, so it's every morning before I go to sleep. Last night, while I was meditating, my dog was sitting next to me and he was licking his privates. And it was so distracting to me. Like, what are you supposed to do in that moment?
If you're getting distractions?
Yeah.
That's a very specific question.
Because I got really aggravated by it. And I didn't know, am I supposed to stop and tell him to stop? Or am I supposed to, block out the noise? Or what would you do?
Well, that's a great question, because, that's kind of like what life is all about. Like, we're just going about our business, and then these distractions come up. And so, there are a couple ways that you could handle it. I would say one is, if you're planning on sitting for a while longer and you're just really realizing that it's just going to be too aggravating, I guess you could just take the dog, out of the room. And so he's not bothering you. And another way to do it, which is absolutely 100% perfectly fine too, is just to let him keep doing what he's doing. And every time you notice that you're paying attention to that, bring your attention back to your breath.
Okay.
And also, and then actually, one of the benefits of doing it that way is that you'll see very clearly how we need to have things the way we want them to be in order to feel comfortable. Yeah. And so much of life, is
not the way,
is not that way. And then it creates disturbances for us. And then we react in all kinds of ways. And sometimes those ways are tragic, right? And sometimes they're just rather benign. But So if that's happening, like, oh, you could, as you meditate, you could be very aware that, oh, I'm being very agitated now because things aren't the way I want them to be. But you know what? I can be okay with that.
Mm-hmm.
And just let it go and come back to your breath. And every time you hear him doing his thing, just come back to your breath. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's okay.
Okay.
I'm just gonna put at least one more thing in there about this. Is just that I just encourage people so much to stay with it. To not feel like, oh, I can't do it, or I don't have time. And sure, start with 3 minutes and then work your way up. Ideally, I think, in terms of the scientific research, you want to get to the point where you're doing it like 10 to 20 minutes a day, at least 5 or 6 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
But start with anything. Start with 1 minute.
It's all about right now. I'm trying to create the habit of doing it and then building it up gradually. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully.
I love what you said about building up the habit, because that's like a huge part of life, right? About doing new things. And I was really blessed. I've been blessed to have a great meditation teacher, Tara Brach, and remember one thing that she taught us was that her teacher told her, no matter what happens with your day, if it's a really busy day, you got kids and they're running around, you take care of them all day or whatever, you got a job, and tonight you just don't, you're like, oh, I just don't have time to meditate today. Then at least before your head hits the pillow, before you get into the bed, even if you just take 1 minute, just so you can keep the habit going. So that's why I love what you said about trying to develop the habit.
Right. So keep the habit, hell or high water.
Hell or high water. Okay.
Well, actually, Eric, you're one of the biggest reasons I've been trying to incorporate meditation in my life. I'm trying to do it in the morning as a part of my morning routine. And during the time I've been doing it, one question that was coming up a lot in my mind is, how do I know I'm doing it correctly? Because sure, I feel relaxed and I feel that my morning is a tad better because of it. But is there some way I can observe the effects and actually know if I'm doing it correctly?
There's so much more to mindfulness and the benefits that you can get from it than is often just talked about very casually in the culture. Being relaxed is something that's talked about a lot, like, oh, it has a relaxing effect, and it does, and that's important. But I would say it's really probably one of the least important things that mindfulness can do for you. And so I would just encourage people to, whether it's a book or you go online and watch a video, take a little bit of time to learn about mindfulness and the impact it can have on you so that you can, really understand it. For instance, a really fundamental thing with mindfulness is, again, that ability after you've been doing it for a while to then, when you're not doing it, observe things happening in your life, in your head, or with your emotions that you wouldn't have noticed before, and realize that you have choices in terms of how to respond to those thoughts or those emotions. Like, to me, that's a huge part of mindfulness. So getting to the point where you can see in real time, I'm starting to have a certain emotion that in the past has created problems, let's say, or issues. It's maybe unhealthy for me. And then once you see it, then you're able to make a decision about how to handle it. Or you're having certain thoughts, that in the past maybe you've realized haven't been so healthy or haven't really led to a good place, or just, same old bullshit. And in real time, you can make a decision. Oh, you know what? Actually, I don't have to think like that. I don't have to feel like that. So there's so much that comes from mindfulness if you actually practice it beyond the relaxation. So I would say, I don't think there's any way just to be able to say for sure that, it's working. If you're doing it, 5 or 6 times a week anyway, or every day, 10 or 20 minutes a day at least, and you're faithful to it, I think, absolutely it's going to have an impact on you.
So essentially it's going to show in other areas of my life.
Oh, totally. And that's the whole goal of it. Seriously, the idea, I know this is such a big piece right now because there's so much stress, let's say out in the workplace, just with all of the distractions and people trying to stay focused and their attention being drawn here and there and to the devices and to the, it's the computer, to the phone, to this. It just seems like things are just constant like motion almost. So we're being bombarded by information and stuff. And so stress and overwhelm has just become such a big part of so many people's lives. So there's a big focus on mindfulness as a way to reduce stress and be more relaxed. And that's absolutely true. I mean, it does do that when you practice it. It's helpful. But there's so much more to it that it can give you. I mean, frankly, mindfulness came out of Buddhism. So this has been around for thousands of years. And, it's a significant part of the Buddhist tradition. And it became secularized. So kind of got pulled out of Buddhism, since Buddhism is a religion. Although for some people it's like a philosophy of life, not a religion, but it is a religion. Mindfulness got brought into our culture from people who were Buddhists, who decided the way to get this mainstream would be to strip away, the Buddhism and just make it about the mindfulness. And so some stuff gets lost in translation in terms of what mindfulness, fundamentally can really do for you. And that's why this idea of like, oh, it's great for reducing stress. So a lot of people just think of it like that. Oh, it's something that can relax me. And they don't go deeper with all the other things it can do for you.
How do you incorporate meditation into your day? When do you meditate? Do you have a routine, morning routine or evening routine?
I don't personally have a routine. I know it's very, very helpful for a lot of people. The reason probably I don't is because I work for myself. I don't have a very rigid schedule for myself in terms of the way I do my work. So, and I work from home. And so I have most days I have a lot of freedom in terms of how to do things and when. And so I kind of do it at some point during the day. I'll decide, this is when I want to do it, and I'll do it.
That will lead us nicely to your employment and in your projects. I don't even know the answer to this question. Have you been employed in your life?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was employed for sure. I got started as a reporter for a local newspaper when I was probably like about 15 and did that through high school. And then in college, I was employed, little part-time jobs here and there. And then went through a couple periods of transition during my life where I didn't have a business for a couple of years and was employed. And then as an adult, after college, I've had a couple of periods where I've worked for others for a couple of years, which was very nice in some ways.
Yeah, was it really?
I mean, it was really nice in the sense that, like once the day was over, the job was over.
The job
at 5 o'clock or whatever time, the job was over.
Yeah, you didn't bring it home.
No.
And then I guess at some point you must have made the decision to go solo or freelance, right? And to focus on what you want to do.
Yeah, that just happened to happen, right after college. So, I ended up going into business right away and then went through a period where I lost the business. Well, actually, that period was pretty quick. It was only a few months, and then I started up something else. Oh, yeah. And then when I sold my business and moved from Massachusetts down to Washington, D.C., then I worked for someone else for 3 years and then started my own business again. Yep.
So how did you come up with ideas for your businesses? Did you just go with whatever you felt like in the moment? Like, were you just doing it straight away?
All right, well, let's see about this. So in college, I was working part-time at a flower shop. I was making deliveries. And it just so happened that the gentleman who owned the store was getting ready to retire. And I had an opportunity to buy the business from him. So that just happened to be, I was there and the timing was such, and I was, about to be done with college, and it's like, I need something to do. And so it worked out. And then my next business, which I actually ran at the same time as I had that business, but a buddy and I this is when I was living in Massachusetts and we were living in Boston, and went up to Maine for July 4th. To the beach, and we were done for the day at the beach, and we were getting ready to head back to the highway to come back to Boston, and we actually made a wrong turn. So instead of going left, we went right, and as soon as we went right, we drove by this drive-in theater. And he and I had many times over the years talked about drive-ins and how much we love drive-ins, and all these ideas what we would ever do if we could like open up a drive-in. And then we drove by this drive-in and there's a big sign that said for sale or lease and a phone number.
That's awesome. It's like it was waiting there for you.
So we got out, we walked around, we looked at it, we wrote down the phone number, and then called the next day. And I told him what had happened, the guy that answered, and told him that we wanted to talk about maybe leasing it. And he said, okay, sure. What would you like to do with the space? And I was like, well, what do you mean? What do you want to do with it? He said, well, what kind of business do you want to run? And I'm like, well, we want to run a drive-in theater. He's like, oh, you want to run a drive-in? Oh, well, because we've had people call, like they want to like do a flea market or they want to do something else. He said, but I don't think it's a good idea to run a drive-in theater because it closed 10 years ago because there wasn't enough business. I said, yeah, but my buddy and I, like, we have some ideas and we really, we think we know that we can do it and it'll work. And so we'd love to try. And so remarkably, I don't know, I still can't even believe it. 25 days later, after the conversation, the drive-in theater was open. So we learned everything we needed to learn. We got everything, found the people. We contacted the media. We had like front page articles. Oh, there's big news, like a drive-in theater is opening. Like that's unheard of.
25 days later? You said
20. I know I still can't believe it. That we were still, oh my God, like the gates were supposed to open at like 7, let's say, for people to come into the place. And we were running a little behind schedule. We were like still trying to like get the Coke machine going and stuff. And we were running a few minutes late and there were so many people came that the traffic was backed up in both directions. There was cars trying to get in. They were blocking side streets and businesses. About 5 police cruisers came to direct traffic, and they told us we had to open because we were causing a hazard on the roadway. And
that's awesome.
And we had
that's what I call a good opening.
Yeah,
it was awesome. We had a huge turnout, and so we ended up running that for 3.5 years.
Cool. Wow, that's amazing.
At this point of time, was it really mainstream to open drive-in theaters?
No, they were all closing. We kind of did some things that worked well. It's a summer business, so, and we were both doing other things, so this wasn't like providing our livelihood, but it was a really fun venture. It really,
that's for sure.
And it was probably the most fun I've ever had in terms of working and just, deciding on which films and getting the cartoons and just greeting the people and the whole thing. It was just a really kind of magical time for us, and we were just like both out of college, and so it was really nice. But then other businesses, so another one was I was working for a company. The company went out of business, and I decided to start my own company doing the same thing. So I did that and had a business for about 13 years. Probably the one thing that I did that wasn't something that I was already kind of doing in some way or hadn't really, or the drive-ins we weren't doing, but we kind of had an idea we'd like to do it, but we never thought we would. But I had a restaurant delivery service in Massachusetts quite a few years ago. And that was just, I heard about this one delivery service in San Francisco that was delivering for a bunch of restaurants that was really successful. And I decided, let me do that. That came actually after I lost my business, my first business. And I wanted something else to do. I wanted to keep working for myself. And I'd heard about this restaurant delivery service in San Francisco, and I was like, oh, I could do that myself. That's like really easy to do and doesn't take much capital. And so started that. Most of the time it's been kind of things that were already kind of part of my life in one way or the other.
That's awesome. It seems like you just came up with an idea and a minute later you were already in it.
More like stumbled on an idea, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were doing Uber Eats before there was Uber Eats.
Yeah. The whole restaurant delivery service is funny because that was like, way before its time. I mean, I had that for 7 years, and I sold that when I moved down to Washington, D.C. But, we were just doing it on a very small scale. But now, years later, with Uber Eats and Postmates and whatnot. Do they have that there? I don't know. Do you have like Uber Eats and Postmates?
Uber Eats, yeah.
Yeah. So those have become, very big. I wish I would, if only, I don't wish, but if I had been more of a visionary, maybe could have thought of a way to actually make it much more successful, because they're very successful now with these things, but we just had a small little operation.
True. So far there's been 3 ventures in 3 different sectors or 3 different industries.
Yeah.
Did you stuck to any of those, or you're following ones in totally new directions as well?
So then I moved from Washington, D.C. I'd been there for a few years. I moved to Phoenix for a year for a relationship that didn't work out. And it was at that point that I discovered California and really fell in love with Southern California, like LA area, San Diego area. And I knew I didn't want to stay in Phoenix. And I thought, oh, I really wanted to move to California, but I didn't know a soul there. And I didn't know what I would do. And all my friends and family were back on the East Coast. So I moved from Phoenix back to DC. And got a job for someone and did that for a year. And then the company went out of business. It was a market research business. We were doing market research for movie studios, testing movie trailers and TV commercials for new movies. And after doing that for about a year, that company went out of business. And I started my own company doing the same thing. Ran that for 13 years. But after doing that for, 4 or 5 years, I was feeling unsatisfied. I was feeling I wasn't really doing anything that was too meaningful. So at this point, so now I'm, starting to get older, I'm feeling more like, meaning of life stuff and what's really important. And I was like, this kind of work isn't really fulfilling me anymore. And I really wanted to do something where I thought I would be able to make a difference in the world. And I'd always thought, like, I was working for a newspaper since I was 15 and went to college for journalism. And I had thought that eventually my dream was to have my own little newspaper somewhere and to be able to use it to help make the community a better place. And so I always had this idea that I could do something to be beneficial to the world, and it wasn't happening. I was just doing these other things, and it was all fine for as long as it was fine. And then I just started feeling like, oh, I'm not satisfied. And so at that point, I started thinking about, oh, what else could I do? Like, what other kind of business can I run? Can I go to work for someone? Can I start a nonprofit? What could I do where I would really feel like I was making some kind of contribution? And then just right around that time, I had already been meditating for a few years, but someone told me about this meditation class that was held every Wednesday night outside of DC. And I started going. That's where I met Tara Brach, who's this phenomenal teacher. And she's got podcasts, or I don't know podcasts, but she's got her all of her talks are online. And she was just amazing. And I just really learned a lot about mindfulness. So I had been meditating. So this is classic. Like for me, I had been meditating, but it was just like a relaxation technique. I'd read, oh, this helps you, kind of relax. And so I was like, oh, okay, I did that. And then once I started going to Tara's classes or talks, we call them, I started realizing, oh, mindfulness is a lot more than about just being, more relaxed. And so I started learning all this stuff, and I just really fell in love with it and learning more about compassion and serving others. So I got very involved in my meditation community. And at one point, Tara asked me if I would help organize, I was very entrepreneurial, a screening of a film about some nuns in Tibet. It was this beautiful, beautiful film about these wonderful nuns in Tibet that she was hoping could be shown in DC on the day that the Dalai Lama was going to come and do a public talk. And so a buddy and I spent a few weeks organizing this public screening, and it was I loved like organizing this and letting people know about this beautiful film. And it was such a contrast because my day job, so to speak, my business was we were doing market research for all these, Hollywood films that I didn't really care much about any of them. Most of them were like blockbuster and stuff. They had big budgets and like a lot of them weren't movies I would even see myself, and they certainly weren't. A lot of them were not good, not to me, good movies, quote unquote good. But now, but then in my spare time, I'm spending like this month and a half, like promoting this beautiful film that I really, believe in. So the day before the screening, I'm just sitting in a park across the street from where I live on a park bench, just kind of looking out at this little pond. It's a beautiful day. The sun's out, just kind of thinking about my life and thinking about how good I felt, around this film. And I was like, what if we could have a whole festival of films, like, nice kind of like small kind of films that that are like about mindfulness and compassion. And we could have some talks and meditation, and we could have some music. And so I called my buddy who I was doing the screening with and said, I told him the idea. And as I'm walking out of the park, I'm on the phone with him telling him this. I'm like, hey, should we want to put this together? And he says, yeah, sure. And so we put together this festival called Buddha Fest. which is a weekend festival of films and talks and meditation and music. And then I started spending a lot of time on that, and I started delegating most of the responsibility for my other business, the market research, to somebody else, so I could spend my time doing that because I really loved doing that, and I didn't really care about the other. I mean, it was bringing me in an income, which was the only thing I was happy about. And so, that helped support me as I got Budapest going, and did that for a while. From that came the idea to do actual conferences around mindfulness and mindful leadership. And
that's awesome, and that's so inspirational. I cannot help but to stop at the thought that you were saying, like, if it's nothing, like, oh, I started this business, then it failed, then I decided to do this other one. So it seems like it doesn't really hinder you in any way if your business fails. It's just a lesson and you move on, right?
I mean, I went through a very difficult time after I lost my first business. I mean, emotionally, it was kind of devastating. People, I mean, actually, it was a big lesson for me. It's something that I've come a long, long way on. It's still, I'm sure I'm still, growing with it. But, I had a lot of expectations of myself, and I thought other people did as well. And I was in high school, let's say, as a teenager, I had this very high profile position at this newspaper where I was like reporting on really important stories, like all the most important stories, like, whether it's murder trials or all the town politics and everything. And so I was well known in town. And then when I went off to college, I had this sense that people expected that I was going to do really well, because I was like class president and this and all that, and most likely to succeed, and voted in high school and stuff, and all these things that kind of, I guess, built up my ego. That was good in some ways, I guess, because I had some degree of confidence about being able to do things. Although I don't know about that. The confidence, I think, comes with the experience of actually doing things. So I had been doing things. I had been very involved in student government and the newspaper and stuff. So I had been doing things. I went off to college, and I just felt like, oh, I'm supposed to, be successful. And so I had my business, and it seemed like I was, oh, look at that. Right after college, he has his own business, and he's doing great, and ta-da-ta-da, la la la. And then suddenly, when things made a turn, and then ended up losing the business, then that was really difficult, because I was having to confront that I wasn't this, didn't seem like I was this person that I thought I was, or that people thought I was. And it was hard for me. It was very hard. I didn't even share with many people what had happened. A lot of people didn't even realize what had happened, because I was just too ashamed. I thought I was supposed to be successful, and if I wasn't successful, then that meant I guess it meant I felt I'd be less liked or less loved or less cared about or whatever. And so coming from that, I mean, the good thing was that after a while, after I started my next business and then sold that, now over time, as time was going on, I was more aware of my ego, in a sense, and that I needed to not be doing things because I thought other people expected them, of me, and that I wasn't defined by whether I was successful or not.
Exactly.
It was like who I was as a person. Does that answer your question? So, and especially early on, it was hard, but after I lost the business, now I had no money. I needed to do something. And I've been, running my own business at that point, between the drive-ins and the flower shops, for like 5 years. And I just was feeling very entrepreneurial. I was like, oh, I want to keep working for myself. So it was like, oh, what can I do next that, doesn't take very much money, that I can kind of start right away and get an income coming in, because otherwise I'm not going to pay the bills.
So right now, your main thing that you're doing is the Budapest.
After a few years of doing Budapest, we've started these conferences. So we started the Mindful Leadership Summit. The Mindful Leadership Summit is all about bringing together people to learn what it means to be a mindful leader and how to be a mindful leader. And so I did that with a partner in DC for 4 years. And then I moved to LA, and I sold my half of the business to him. And then I started my own business here doing conferences. So we had a Mindful Workplace Summit and a Mindful Leadership Summit here in California. So now it's a mix of things. So we're doing Budapest and the conferences.
And it's also a mix of online and in-person conferences, right?
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah. So the online Mindful Leadership Conference is a 10-day conference. And then Budapest is live here in LA for a weekend. And then we film it all. And then after it's all over, then we actually have an online festival for about 6 weeks where people can watch all the films and talks and music.
So what are the biggest differences between hosting an online event and an in-person one? And what do you consider the biggest pros and cons of both approaches?
Well, I mean, the pros, I guess, would be they're easier in the sense that you're not having to manage as many logistics in terms of bringing people to places. So you're not having to bring all these, speakers to a venue, flying them in and putting them up, and having to manage hundreds of people, attendees that are coming. So there's that whole element of it that you don't have, which makes it much easier in terms of what goes into putting on the event. There's still a lot of work doing an online conference, depending on what kind of conference you do. Like our conference had online conference had 30 speakers. So that's a pretty big size one. It went over the course of 10 days. So there's a lot of work, but it doesn't compare to what's involved with actually having to put on the live one. Another pro is that you can reach more people, of course, for sure, so reach a lot more people with the online. And con would be just not being able to bring people together in community. Like, I really enjoy bringing people together. Yeah. And community is so friggin' important, yes. Right? It's so friggin' important. And it's something that, it's always been important, always, but now, never more important than now, right? With all of, with us all like on our devices and everything, and so much stuff not being done like, quote unquote, in real life, the opportunity to actually be in real life with groups of people is really important. So I miss that element of it. Frankly, when Budapest is over, let's say, or any of the events that I do, 2 or 3 days are over, I miss being with the people. I miss that energy of being with people.
That speaks so much of how much you're involved in it, and you can hear that it goes from your passion. That's something really you want to do. What I was interested in also is that now that you've been doing it for a couple of years, I'm sure you have your ways of getting people's attention, and like, how do you get yourself out there? How do you make sure that people know about your conferences? What kinds of ads or marketing do you use? And essentially, how do you make sure that those conferences can happen again?
Well, it's a mix. It's a mix of paid advertising and also bringing in sponsors who are aligned with, what we're doing, who can then help promote the event, to their email lists. So we put together email copy for them and images and whatnot that they can use to send out emails to their lists. So that really helps a lot. And then we do paid advertising. We do a lot of Facebook ads. Facebook is, of course, a very valuable tool for being able to micro-target people who would be interested in your particular event. There's a lot to learn around Facebook advertising and about how to make the most of it. You can really fine-tune the audience that you're advertising to through buying Facebook ads. So that's our main source of advertising, would be Facebook ads.
And when you say Facebook, do you also mean Instagram or just purely Facebook?
We've done very little with Instagram. I think, the belief right now, at least last time I looked at this about 6 months ago, I don't know if it's changed since, is that Facebook ads are more effective for this kind of thing. I'm sure there are things that Instagram is, probably effective with in terms of advertising, but I feel like, at least for this kind of event, Facebook seems to get a better response.
And are you willing to share like the percentages of where do most people come from? Is it Facebook as an overwhelming majority, or is it just a part of the pie chart?
Oh, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot. It's not the majority, but it's a very substantial amount that comes through Facebook.
Do you also do print ads?
Very little with print. For the mindfulness conferences, there's There's one main magazine that reaches people interested in mindfulness. It's called Mindful. So we advertise in that. So, and that's obviously good because it hits exactly our target market.
Yeah.
But outside, the big thing with advertising is with spending money on advertising, you've got to like fine tune exactly. You've got to figure out, and through trial and error, a lot of times, like who to put your ad in front of. Because if you're not putting it in front of the
Right
quote unquote the right people,
yeah,
then you're just wasting it, and you can go through your ad budget so quickly without having the right results. So Facebook just allows you, and we do some Google remarketing ads too, on a lesser basis, but so remarketing to people who've already come to our website, let's say. And so if they've already come and they didn't purchase, then we can put Google ads in front of them to remind them to come and buy, hopefully. But Facebook, ads, micro-targeting down to, everything, how it works, I'm sure, geography, age, gender, even, interests.
Interests, yeah.
We've created quite a marketing tool there.
For sure. It's powerful stuff. I don't really use Facebook as much. Maybe Adele would have more experience with that.
Not really, actually.
Not really. Well,
yeah, so you guys are interested. You both have moved away from Facebook. Like you're doing a lot more like you're doing Twitter or Instagram or...
Well, Adele is focused on Instagram,
I'm
right?
focused on Instagram, yeah.
And I will say this so the events that we do, so both the Buddhist event, Buddha Fest, and the mindfulness events. So we have there's a wide range of ages, of course. But in terms of where most people, the ages of most people, it tends to be, you're talking like upper 30s, up into the 50s, it could be even higher. So I think, and I'm no expert on Instagram at all, or even social media really, but my sense would be that maybe Instagram has become especially popular maybe with millennials, and maybe the people that are still like in their upper 30s and 40s and 50s are still more on Facebook. So that works really well for us because that's actually the market we're trying to reach.
Instagram in Europe and also in the Czech Republic has been growing for the past 2 years very much, whereas Facebook has already grown up to its potential, I feel like. It might be different, or it for sure is different in the United States, but that's how it is in Europe and in the Czech Republic right now.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Facebook has peaked and now it's just losing users left and right. Not sure about all age groups, but in terms of millennials and people our age, 2 years ago when Snapchat was on top of its game, then a lot of people went away from Facebook because that's where their parents were at. So they wanted to have a platform
for themselves,
just with their friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would just say, when it comes to the advertising piece, though, I would say just because, let's just assume that you were right, it's peaked and people are moving away from it. There's still a bazillion people using it, including millennials. And so unless you have an astronomical ad budget, you're all, with Facebook ads, you're only paying, when people, depending on how you set it up, either when they view it or they click on it. So, you're not paying for something that people aren't seeing. $100 million ad budget, then I guess, maybe you wouldn't be able to get enough views on Facebook. But if you have a rather small ad budget like most of us do, then there are certainly plenty of people of all ages on Facebook that you can micro-target with your ads. It's all about testing.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You probably know that already, but you've got to test. You got to test different headlines. You got to test different images. You got to test different messages. Otherwise, you're wasting money. We've wasted a lot of money over the years, and we fine-tune the way that we do it because seriously, it's about testing.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess that goes for everything in life. Also, what I wanted to ask you as we're getting towards the end is, how big is your team? How many people do you work with on your conferences and summits?
Well, there are 3 of us that work here in the main office here at my place. Sometimes 4. Right now it's 3. Then we have a couple of people, sometimes 3 people who work remotely, depending on where we are in the year and how much we have going on.
What's your history with managing people? That's a skill like
Bad
every other,
history.
right?
It's
You
a
have to
bad
learn.
history.
Bad history.
Bad history. Oh, I've struggled with it, over the years. You could be very like nice and likable and all and in general, but then when it comes to trying to manage people and get them to, quote unquote, get them to do what you want them to do or what they need to do, it's definitely been a struggle for me over the years, and it's my least favorite part of the work. It's much better now, much better, frankly, by learning more about myself, and learning more about myself and my own triggers and my own needs and my own ego and why I do certain things. And it's really, self-growth. That's what I would suggest to anyone. Like, if you want to get into business, you just want to live. But I guess, if you're targeting, especially, people with your podcast who want to, let's say, get into business for themselves, like, learn about yourself. Like, you got to learn about yourself. You got to spend time. I mean, you don't have to, but I think if you want to have the best results, you'd be wise early on to learn as much as you can about yourself, about, personal growth. Like, I will highly recommend this book that's been probably the most influential book I've ever read, in my life. It's called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Okay.
This is a fantastic book. And there are obviously many good books out there, but this one is just so clear, so concise, easy to read. It really shows you about your ego. It shows you about the way the mind works. It shows you how we react emotionally to certain things and why and how we can change that. Like, it really has helped me so much to understand myself better and understand life better. And so no matter what role you want to play in life, but especially if you're going to be managing other people, I would learn about these things because they'll really come in handy.
Well, from my experience when I was managing people, from my limited experience, one thing I learned quite fast was that my perfectionism has to go away, because I don't think anybody does the thing you want done as good as you would. And you just have to deal with it and accept that, I guess.
Or at least not do it the way you want. The jury's out a lot of times whether it's as good as or not, but it's not the same.
The same way, yeah.
Because I've had, of course, that too, and then sometimes it could turn out that it's actually better, the other way, but just wasn't the way that I was thinking was going to be better.
Yeah, sometimes that's the best case scenario. Sometimes even that happens, that you're surprised positively by the results.
But that's not your typical experience, right? I got it.
Yeah, definitely not. The second thing I learned was, once I was telling people what to do, be it at college or as a supervisor when I was working last summer in Massachusetts, actually, was that as soon as people did something I told them to do, I was like, that's awesome. They really did that. Every time they've actually done something, I was so glad they've done it. It was almost coming as a surprise to me, because there's nothing you can really do to force them to do it. But I guess it's not exactly a suggestion, but in a way, it's if they don't want to do it, they're not going to do it. When they do it, it feels so good, doesn't it? Yeah, I guess it didn't really work its way into a question. But how do you deal with telling people what to do? What kind of methods or stances do you take to make sure that things get done?
Well, I think for one thing, something I've really found is important is it's really important to make sure that one person is responsible and knows they're responsible for doing a thing. So whatever it is that needs to be done, there's got to be one person who is assigned, let's say, the responsibility of making sure that it gets done. Because what happens a lot of times is, if you're working on something collaboratively, so often things end up falling through the cracks or not getting done, let's say correctly, because there wasn't at least one person who was actually
in charge,
the responsible person. Right. I don't know that I have anything, particularly bright to say around this, other than I guess I've come to realize that, people really need to feel a sense of ownership over things. They need to feel like you think they're capable and that they are able to just go and do stuff. So, it's this stereotypical like buzzword micromanage, right? The less that you micromanage people, give people a clear understanding of what you want done. And if there are parameters, let them know what they are. And whatever the timeline is, then have check-ins as needed, have that set up as part of the process. So you have an opportunity to find out how things are going and you can adjust, in real time before the whole thing is, too far down the line. But then, give people the opportunity to do it, because it's something I've had a hard time with, delegating and just trusting. When you can do that, then people feel empowered. I know it's a buzzword. I don't really like using buzzwords so much. They feel like they're not being, babysat. Like they feel like an adult, an independent adult who's capable and who can just go do something, instead of like someone's constantly like over their shoulder. I don't necessarily mean literally over their shoulder, but that someone's spending too much time telling them what to do. So
they feel the trust put into them and they don't want to deceive that.
Yeah. And what I've come to learn is that people volunteer the best part of themselves. Like you can pay people to show up to work and do the work, but best part of people is volunteered. Like no one has to give it their best. No one has to have a great attitude at work. No one has to have a good spirit, be enthusiastic, like that comes because people they feel it and they want to do that. But I've come to realize that by, being like I've had over time, it's much less now, but it still happens sometimes, could be kind of reactive, maybe get a little emotional in terms of, getting upset about something, or, really pushing to get things done exactly the way I want them to be done instead of giving the person, more latitude to do things. It kind of saps people of their spirit, in a way. And if people, I believe, and this is something that, through doing the Mindful Leadership Summits and the Mindful Workplace Summits, I've come to learn a lot more about myself by being exposed to, a lot of these talks myself and these teachings and these speakers and reading their books and whatnot and studying, that people really, they volunteer the best part of themselves. You can pay them, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but you can pay them to come to work, put in the time. That doesn't mean they're going to give you their best. If you want their best, which includes a great spirit and attitude and really caring about the organization, the company, and really wanting what's best, for you as the owner and for the company, they have to feel some ownership over what they're doing. And also it really, really helps if they feel a real connection to the mission of what you're doing. If you're all about like customer service and like you really care about your customers and people sense that, then people who care about that, that's part of their mission. And, so whatever it is, if you have employees who are able to really know what your mission is and you stay focused on that mission and they buy into the mission, so to speak, then I've found they're going to be much more likely to give you their best as well.
I mean, this is a great point to finish our interview on. I really enjoyed talking to you, Eric.
Thank you.
Me too.
Enjoyed being here and talking to both of you.
Thank you so much for coming. It was a pleasure talking to you. It's very inspirational. Do you want to leave any breadcrumbs for people to follow you online or to follow your projects? Do you have any links that you can share?
Buddhafest.org.
Okay.
That's buddhafest.org. That's our festival, mindfulsummits.com. That's where you can see the live conferences that we're doing. And mindfulleadershipconference.com. That's the online conference. And I want to leave one more breadcrumb. I said this before, but I highly encourage people to buy The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer.
Okay.
Like I don't know him. I don't have anything to do with the book, but the impact it's had on my life, and I know so many people. If you go on Amazon and read the reviews and see the impact this book has had on people's lives. I don't use this term lightly, but it could be a life changer. It has been for me, and I would recommend buying it and then reading it and rereading it and rereading it and spend 6 months with it. Because we have a tendency of sometimes like we buy a book and then we get through it and we're ready to go to the next book. I know I'm like that. Like, read it, make notes, and then stay with it for whatever, 6 months, and just practice it. I wish that I had known a lot earlier in life the stuff that I have learned and I'm still learning from that book. It would have made my businesses very different, would have made my own life very different. So that's my final breadcrumb.
As soon as you mentioned the book, I was giving myself a mental note saying, I definitely have to come back to what Eric just said to find the book. All right, thank you so much for coming.
All right, thanks, Michael. It's great seeing you and talking with you. And Adela, really nice to meet you.
It was nice meeting you
talking
as well.
to you, and I love what you guys are doing and wish you well with your podcast.
Thank you.
So there's one more thing we wanted to tell you. Eric?
Talk to you next time.